guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing another case that took place in Toronto, Canada. I know I have quite a few Canadian subscribers on my channel, and I wanted to do this one because it's very well known across Canada because when it happened, it left all of Toronto on edge. This is one of those stories that is every parent's nightmare, and I'm sure that it changed the way that a lot of people parented. So today we're going to be talking about the murder of Holly Jones, a 10-year-old girl who was abducted in her neighborhood while walking a friend home in 2003. The investigation into who murdered her is very interesting, and luckily police were able to track down her killer, so this is a solved case. This case is really sad and heartbreaking and honestly really scary because it just goes to show that you never know who your neighbors are or what kind of evil person might be living in very close proximity to you. We're actually coming up on the 20-year anniversary since Holly was murdered, so I thought it would be a really good time to do this video. But before we get into it, I just want to say if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe because it really does help my channel. So let's start off by talking about who Holly Jones was. Holly Maria Jones was born on September 14th, 1992 to parents Maria Jones and George Stonehouse. She was the youngest of 4 children. Her siblings are named Shauna, Natasha, and James. Holly was described as being a lively, gentle, and energetic kid. She had hopes of becoming a singer one day because she loved music. She also loved sports, specifically basketball and running cross country. And overall, she was just a really well-liked kid with lots of friends, and she was really close with her family, especially her mom. And at the time of her murder, her family was living in the Junction Triangle neighborhood, which is in West Toronto, roughly in the area of Bloor Street, DuPont Street, Lansdowne Avenue, and Dundas Street West. And in 2003, and to this day actually, it was considered a safe neighborhood and a really good place to raise children. And like every neighborhood in a large city, it had its fair share of crimes, but in no way was it considered a dangerous or unsafe area. So Holly's parents, along with many other parents in this neighborhood in the early 2000s, were comfortable to let their kids walk to and from school alone and roam the neighborhood alone. But now that neighborhood will always have the tragic events that took place in 2003 tied to it. On May 12th, 2003, which was actually the day after Mother's Day, 10-year-old Holly wanted to walk a friend home after a play date. So she asked her mother if she could walk her friend home, and it sounds like her friend was actually a year or 2 younger than her, and that's why she wanted to walk her home. Her mother recounts that she actually contemplated it for a bit and ended up telling Holly that it was okay for her to do it. Her mother ended up deciding that it was fine for Holly to walk her friend home because her friend only lived a couple blocks away, and Holly was really familiar with the neighborhood. She had grown up there, her school was in the area, and the houses of many of her friends were in the area. So Holly and her friend headed there sometime in the early evening hours while it was still light out. After they made it to her friend's house and Holly said goodbye to her friend, she headed back to her house, walking along Perth Avenue and then onto Bloor Street West. But Holly never made it back home, and after an hour or 2 had passed, her parents knew that something very wrong had happened, so they called the police to report her missing. Almost right away, the Toronto police were able to rule out any family members as suspects, and they had determined that this was most likely a stranger abduction. They jumped into action immediately and began interviewing witnesses and searching the area all throughout the night. They knocked on doors, searched garages, backyards, all the local trash cans, and an Amber Alert was issued the following morning on May 13th. And after a sleepless and most undoubtedly the worst night of their lives, Holly's parents made an appearance on the news, and her mother Maria made a desperate plea for her daughter's safety.
Holly, honey, our hearts are out to you. Baby, if you can hear me, you know how much we love you. I feel you inside of me, and I'm trying to find you. I'm doing everything. Everybody's working very hard. And whoever has her, I beg you with all my heart that you keep her and bring her home to her mother and father. You keep her safe, I beg you. She hasn't ever hurted anyone in her life. She's a happy girl. I beg you not to hurt her. Bring her home to us. Please, don't make her sad.
That clip is just heartbreaking and you can really visibly see the pain that she's in, and I can't even begin to imagine the amount of fear that they were feeling in that moment. But shortly after her parents appeared on the news, police received a report of body parts that had been found washed up on the shore of Ward's Island across the Toronto harbor. A resident of Ward's Island was walking his dog along the shore of Lake Ontario that morning when he saw a black duffel bag floating in the water. He opened it and saw body parts inside, which were later identified to be those of Holly Jones. Police sent divers out into the lake to look for more evidence, and that was when they found a second duffel bag floating near Ontario Place. It was brought back to the lab and discovered to have more of Holly's body parts in it. The detective on the case said notifying her parents that she was found and that she was found in that way was one of the hardest things he's ever had to do. It's just horrific and absolutely devastating. So the case changed pretty quickly from a missing persons operation to a full-on homicide investigation, and they were looking for a child killer. And to say this just scared the community would be a major understatement. People living in the Junction area were absolutely terrified, and the entire city was on edge.
And it's just too dangerous right now.
Everybody's very scared, to the point where they can't even let the children play in their own backyards.
And in the days following Holly's murder, the Toronto police received dozens of calls of people reporting attempted kidnappings, suspicious vehicles, suspicious people, not because there were actual threats, but more because people were so scared and on high alert. The investigation was still underway when Holly was laid to rest on May 20th, 2003. Hundreds of people from all over Toronto showed up to grieve and expressed their shared horror about what happened to such an innocent girl, and also knowing that this child murderer was still out there, free to do the same to another child. This was huge news because it was just so devastating and terrifying. Even the Premier of Ontario at the time attended the funeral. For weeks after when Holly first went missing, dozens of flowers and toys were left outside the family's home, and the city really came together to show their support for the family. And for the next couple weeks, people didn't even really know what to do with themselves. They were so scared, and waiting for updates from the police was reportedly excruciating. Police knew very early on, based off of Holly's autopsy, that they were looking for a child sexual predator. So one of the first things that police did was pull a list of registered sex offenders in the area and surrounding areas, and they were stunned to find out that there were over 200 convicted sexual predators living in Holly's neighborhood. And the news about this spread like wildfire. The community was really angry and appalled that our laws would let these people live in a neighborhood with multiple schools and a lot of children. But anyway, police also knew that child sexual predators usually seek victims in their own neighborhood. So police felt it was important that they narrow in on the route where Holly went missing, and that there was a very real possibility that the killer lived on that route or in close proximity of it. Holly's autopsy also turned up some very important evidence, and that was the killer's DNA, which was extracted from underneath her fingernails. They also found a lot of green fibers inside the black duffel bags that she was found in, and they believe that they came from a green carpet. They also found a couple of weights inside the duffel bags that were used to weigh down the bags once they were placed into the water, but it didn't actually work. So the police had to find a match for this DNA, and it was going to be like finding a needle in a haystack. But they came up with a very controversial plan of asking every male within a 6-block radius of Holly's home for a voluntary DNA sample. Investigators knocked on all the doors of the men that lived in the area, asking for a quick cheek swab, and they explained that if the DNA didn't match, then they would be cleared, and that's all it took. But the police definitely couldn't force anyone to give a DNA sample, and it was strictly volunteer-based. Police ended up collecting over 400 DNA samples, and they said that 99% of the men who were asked to provide one did voluntarily and were very cooperative. In general, most men were really eager to help move this case forward. But one man refused to provide a DNA sample, and he really stood out to police, and his name was Michael Briere. Michael Briere was a 35-year-old software developer for MDS Labs with no criminal record. He had grown up in Quebec but moved to Toronto in his 20s. He had been married before, but at the time of Holly's murder, he was divorced and he didn't have any children. And like I said before, when police were canvassing the area, they asked him for a DNA sample and he refused, which was fully within his rights, but police were suspicious of him right away. And this was for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he lived at 1450 Bloor Street West, which was right on the route that Holly took that day. In fact, she would have walked right past his house. And when officers were speaking with him, he allowed them to come into his home. And when they were in there, they smelled a very strong smell of bleach. They also noticed that Michael had a green carpet in his home, and they also saw a couple of dumbbells that looked exactly like the ones found inside the duffel bags. After their encounter with him, the police were suspicious of him right away, as I said, and they immediately placed him under police surveillance. And all they had to do was wait for him to discard of something with his DNA on it that they could seize and then test against the killer's DNA. After many days of the police tailing him, he finally discarded of a soda can in a McDonald's. And on the rim of the can was his DNA, which was tested against Holly's killer, and it was a match. So Michael Briere was arrested and charged with Holly's murder on June 20th, 2003. And when police brought him in, he confessed to the crime almost immediately, and he gave officers a very detailed account of what happened on that day. Michael explained that he has had an addiction to sexually explicit content involving children for a number of years, and when he woke up on the morning of May 12th, he had an overwhelming urge to abduct a child. Later that day, he spots Holly walking past his house. He had never seen her before or knew who she was. She was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was pure horrific chance. So he runs up to her, covers her mouth, and drags her into his house in broad daylight, and nobody sees this happen. He then murders her and dismembers her. He put some of her remains in the 2 black duffel bags, and what's so creepy is he actually rode the subway down to the waterfront to dispose of them. Like, he literally got on the TTC with a dead body. He put the rest of her in the garbage bin outside his house, and those remains were taken to a landfill somewhere and have never been recovered. So in theory, if he had decided to dispose of all of her in the garbage bin, he may have gotten away with this. Because without the evidence that was found in the lake, this case would have been really hard to solve. The city was very relieved once he was arrested and charged. But what happened to Holly really opened the eyes of many parents about the dangers that are out there. And it just goes to show that you never know who might be living just around the corner from you. A year after he was arrested, Briere pled guilty to first-degree murder on June 17, 2004, and addressed the court and Holly's family before his sentencing. He said, "The crime I am guilty of is simply the worst kind of crime a person can commit. What I did was absolutely wrong. It was done out of selfishness. It was the act of a coward. I accept the sentence which you are able to give me. I stand by my words when I told the police a man who commits these crimes you put away for good. I take no pride in what I have done. The truth is, I am shamed beyond belief. I regret everything. I'm really sorry. I really wish I could undo everything. I have failed as a human being." He then went on to attribute his actions to viewing explicit content involving children online and described his crime as cruel, inhumane, and nightmarish, stating he wished to spare his victim's family the pain of a trial. Quite a few people took these statements as a sign of his genuine remorse, but a lot of officers who worked on the case said, "Don't believe that, and he's just sad that he got caught." And a lot of people were wondering if maybe he had committed other crimes in the past and just had never been caught because the murder of Holly was so extreme. But the police have never been able to link him to any other crimes. And they do believe that this was his first crime. Michael Briere was handed an automatic life sentence of 25 years, and he won't be eligible for parole until 2028, which is dangerously close, but he will likely never be paroled and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He was serving his time in Kingston Penitentiary, which held most of Canada's notorious criminals until 2012 when it closed. I actually wasn't able to confirm where he's serving his time now, but it's most likely Millhaven Institution, which is where the majority of the criminals who were in Kingston Pen went once it closed. After Michael's sentencing, Holly's mother was determined to make sure Holly didn't die in vain and immediately got to work in trying to strengthen laws around explicit content involving children. So she and her husband proposed Holly's Law, which would require everyone convicted of a sexual offense against a child to undergo a mandatory dangerous offender hearing. And this is to help courts better determine risk of recidivism, all in hopes of keeping the streets safer for children. There was a beautiful mural painted by a local graffiti artist at a park in Holly's neighborhood where she used to play. The community has come year after year to tend to a small garden of purple, yellow, and white flowers below the mural. And for years, the community went there to remember Holly, and they would leave flowers and teddy bears. I did see an article from 2019 that said that the mural might actually have to be taken down because the park is being redesigned, which is really sad, but I also saw that the family is working with the city to have the mural relocated. So I don't actually know if it's still there or not, but I might go there and see if it is. Holly's mother did an interview at the 10-year anniversary. I'll put some clips in, but basically she just said that she still remembers Holly and that their family suffered a horrible nightmare, but they were able to get through it together as a family.
This is something that you can't, it's too difficult to grasp, to think about. I do know that you asked the question, how it impacted us. We basically just went crazy, all of us. But we did get back together because we knew there was at one point, I don't know when, within all these, in the last 10 years, that we really do need to be with each other, to grieve properly, to grieve so that it isn't as painful by being with each other as a family. We need each other. I feel really blessed for that. I really do feel blessed for having some pain relieved by being together as a family, because I have heard of other tragedies where families have separated. And I really couldn't imagine dealing with this tragedy without my family. I need my family. And I believe they need me too. The community has helped me get through this actually in a great way, in a great deal, because I don't know how to explain it, but it helps me to know that others are out there caring for Holly. It's not just us loving Holly. I feel like I need to know that everybody loves Holly. I don't know what it is, but I just need that. And this is what the community gave me. They gave me that feeling of caring and for Holly and loving her. Most important, I don't want Holly forgotten. I don't want her to be nothing. She's very, very special to me, of course, because she's my daughter, but because she's gone, I want her to be special to everyone. You know, and I think of her as an angel, but I don't want her to be just my angel. I want her to be everybody's angel.
Toronto will never forget this tragedy, and I really hope that the city does something for the 20-year anniversary. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for today. If you're from Toronto, please let me know if you've heard of this case before, or if you were around when it happened. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.